There's a whole lot of gamers out there that have been on the hunt for one of these, an NES Classic. And chances are, if you've seen one of these in the wild, they cost quite a bit because, well, resellers gotta make a profit, I guess. But let's say you're willing to forego it being from Nintendo, and you're willing to get one for a lot cheaper. Well, there are options out there, and we decided to take a look at one that was sent in from Banggood.com. This is the Coolbaby. That is the weirdest name they could have possibly gone with, but that's what it's called. And unlike the NES Classic, this sucker has 600 games built in. But is it worth your dollar? Let's find out. The Coolbaby hardware looks very similar to an NES Classic, and they're roughly around the same size, but the Coolbaby seems to be just a little bit bigger and, strangely, a little bit lighter. The idea with this system is that somebody sees it on a store shelf and accidentally thinks it's an NES Classic, and at a quick glance, well, you probably might be mistaken for thinking so, but when you look at it close enough, you'll notice that everything is on the direct opposite of where it should be. This looks like an NES Classic if you're looking at it through a mirror. They didn't use the same controller ports the NES Classic uses, which is unsurprising, but what was actually kind of weird was they didn't use the same controller ports you find off an original NES. Instead, they used an Atari joystick port, which really isn't used anymore, but was very common once upon a time. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use original NES controllers with this system, just like the NES Classic. But honestly, if you have an original NES, there's probably no reason to get this, seeing as how it doesn't benefit you when you go to play it on a modern TV. The NES Classic uses HDMI out, giving you that high definition image that gamers have been looking for their old NES games. But when it comes to the Coolbaby, they're using an old AV out, which doesn't give you that same kind of quality. But what makes everything really strange is that the power input for this is the exact same that you would find on an NES Classic, being a USB micro. So while they're willing to use a more modern connector port for power, they didn't want to do that for the video, and they didn't want to do that for the controllers. That's kind of odd. This is the controller that was included with the NES Classic, which is essentially the exact same controller they released back in the 80s. Unfortunately, this has a very short line, but the controller itself feels really good. But when the guys at Coolbaby decided to make their own controller, they changed it up a bit. Now you've got 4 buttons. Now, I know that looks really weird, and it is, but the top buttons there are actually Turbo A and Turbo B, meaning all they do is just push A and B really quick. The controller itself feels very similar, except for one thing that I'm not a big fan of. The D-pad here pops in completely like it's a button, and there's no central pivot, which makes it a little bit of a bad D-pad. It's still workable, and we were able to play all the games you're seeing on this video with this controller, but I prefer the original NES Classic. Unfortunately, like I said, it doesn't use the original controller ports from the NES Classic, or even the original controller ports from the NES, so you're stuck using this. But one thing that's kinda nice, it's got a pretty long cable, which Nintendo didn't do, so that's one point in Coolbaby's favor. So like I said at the beginning of this video, this console has a lot of games built into it, far more than you'll find on the NES Classic. But let's take a look how you actually access those games. As soon as you start up the system, you're given an option between Chinese and English for the game selection menus. The first layer of menus gives you an option between Mario, Contra, Hot Blood Turtle, Adventure, and 545 in 1. Each selection of this menu has a collection of games organized, but as soon as you get to the 545 in 1, well, you start to get a whole bunch of random games that don't really fit anywhere. For instance, when you choose something like Mario, you get access to a menu that allows you to choose between 25 different games that are about Mario. When you add up all the games from all the menus, you're gonna get about 600 games, although there are a couple of hacks and modifications that are just duplicates, which personally I don't consider as extra games, but they do stand out as individual titles on here. So realistically, you're getting something under 600, but let's not bother talking about specifics here, because this entire selection of games is gonna get weird. The menus and the video game selection themselves are just not well designed. As soon as you're finished playing a game and you press restart, you're sent all the way back to the very beginning where you're selecting the languages, which really sucks. If you're going through tons of games that basically add up to 600, you're gonna spend a lot of time trying to traverse and find where games actually are. It's not even a fair competition to compare the Coolbaby interface to the NES Classic's interface. Nintendo took a lot of time and effort into making sure their interface felt right, and unfortunately the original NES Classic doesn't have a heck of a lot lot of games. But if you were to modify it and add extra games, well, it's still easier to traverse and find all the games you want, because even then the system still works that much better. The few game franchises that are organized on the top layer menu, like Mario and Turtles and stuff like that, well, those are easy to find because there's just not that many games in those franchises. But when you get to that 545 in one, it gets really messy. And funny enough, I think the folks behind the Coolbaby knew this was a problem, so they took all 600 games, all 600, and listed them on the back of the box. 600 titles written in the tiniest font they possibly could have to fit on the back of this already small box. It's not organized by genre or even by alphabetical order, so no matter what, it's gonna be a hunt to find any one game you're looking for. And also, despite the fact it's got like 600 games, it still doesn't have a lot of games you might be looking for, like Zelda 1 or 2, and you won't even find Final Fantasy. It's a real mixed bag, and you just don't know what's on here to begin with. But let's just say you do get lucky and you find a game on here that you actually know and you want to play. There's a very good chance it's been heavily modified because none of these are licensed from the original developers of the games. Everything on here is bootleg, so the chances of it running properly and actually being the original code for the game are very sparse. So as you can no doubt see, there's a lot of games on this system, and the majority of the ones I played for the titles I actually knew, like Contra and Super Mario Bros., seemed to run well enough. Basically, they looked and played just like they did on the original NES. But because they are bootleg pieces of software, you never know what's going to run properly and what's not going to run properly. Maybe later on in the level, the game's just going to stop working, or Donkey Kong will turn into Koopa for whatever reason. Those are realities when you're playing with pirated software. But I don't want to talk about all those games we know about, because this system is loaded with tons of hacked and modified games and pirated software I've never seen before. Things that shouldn't exist on the NES, but here they are. So folks, let's go on a journey. When you start off looking at the very first thing you see on the main menu, which is the Mario section, you'll notice it says 25 in 1. Well, folks, call me crazy, but I don't recall there being 25 Super Mario Bros. Games on the NES. Sure, you've got the first 3 Super Mario Bros. Games that are on here, and they seem to work very well. But then you get something like this. On the main menu, it's called Mario 10, but as soon as it starts up, it reveals itself to be Super Brothers Kung Fu Mari. What? As soon as you start the game, it quickly reveals itself to simply be a hack of Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu on the NES. Which is hilarious because I don't know why anyone played this game and thought, oh boy, I gotta take this Jackie Chan game and quickly replace his face with Super Mario so he looks all messed up and unproportioned. Usually I would expect to see these kind of games way deeper into the list, but this is the 4th game you can pick off this selection. And folks, it's only gonna get weirder. This next one's called Super Mario 14, and it's copyright 1993 Wario. So at some point, Wario decided to rip off another game and stick Mario's face on it. Sweet. The game is just a rip-off of a Famicom game, and this is the thing that you're gonna see a lot with a lot of these hacks and modifications. They usually go into the Famicom library and pick games that North American gamers wouldn't really recognize or know. This one here has been modified a little bit though, because, well, Mario's face is on the main character now, and there are a lot of coins all over the place, and Super Mario villains. So that was the thing they did. Originally, this would be the 3rd Kid Nicky game, but that one never came out in North America, so they thought we would know it. But we did, but good try anyway. Next one up is called Mario 16. And yep, that's just Joe and Mac. They just ripped off Joe and Mac and put Mario in it. There, that was... why? For the next monstrosity, we're looking at Super Brothers 6, because they forgot that Mario should have been in the title there. And the game starts up with, this is Tiny Toon Adventures. There's Plucky and Dizzy and Furball. I don't really understand. What part of this is Super, oh, there you go. You inserted Super Mario in Tiny Toon Adventures. And you know what? I think I speak for everyone here when we all really, really desperately wanted to see a Super Mario game where he collected carrots. Next up on the chopping block is Super Mario World 9, cause what? Why? We didn't even have any of the other Super Mario World games. We're not even on the right console for Super Mario World, but alright, let's see. Adventure Island 2. You just put Super Mario and Adventure Island 2. You know what? I'll give them this one. They kind of feel the same, almost. you even get to ride a dinosaur at one point, and that's pretty close to Super Mario World, so maybe that's why they did that, I guess. But if I had to make one criticism for the hackers out there that made this game, you do know that Super Mario wears red, right? Technically, this is Luigi. Just for the next time you do this. So the next batch of 3 games are called Kamikaze Mario. Mario's naked in this one. He doesn't have clothes on. I mean, I can't show it to you here, but trust me, they are drawing everything. And what am I even supposed to do here? I don't understand this. I'm at the end of the world, but there's like nowhere for me to go. What kind of game is this? Princess Toadstool is right there, right there. This is the whole point of the mission, is to save her. And there's nothing. You just wait here until you die. This is crazy. The second one makes even less sense than this. There's a point here where you just kind of slide underneath the world for no reason, and then you have to climb up on invisible plants, and I really don't know what comes next. I am just totally lost on what the whole purpose of this is. Now the third one, they put a lot of effort into it, but I'm not even certain what it's supposed to be about. It's called Luigi Ghost House Story, and they put a lot of time and effort into changing all the graphics on this thing. Of all the Kamikaze games, this is the one to try out the most because, well, I seem to get the farthest in it and it made the most sense, but it still is mindlessly hard. When you were a kid, did you ever think, wouldn't it be cool if they had the original Super Mario Bros. Engine, but just random characters from other Nintendo universes just showed up for no reason at all? Well, then you need to play Excite Mario Bros. You'll find characters like Samus, Kirby, Pikachu, and even the Excite Bike Biker is in here for no reason at all. This is just really weird. Next up is Mario in Space, and all they did was they ripped off Galaga and changed out all the sprites. Neato. How about playing Bomberman, but instead of actually Bomberman being in the game, you're Super Mario combined with all the other sprites from the original Super Mario Bros. Game? No? How about Balloon Fight, but this time with Super Mario instead of the main character from Balloon Fight? That not doing it for you? Well, how about Load Runner, but this time with Super Mario instead of the main character? You know what I'm saying here? It's just a lot of games you've already played or seen, but this... This time, Mario is just the character that you're playing as. And it goes on and on. There's all sorts of weird hacks and modifications to existing Mario games, including a really weird drug-fueled Yoshi's cookie, which is just bizarrely wrong. What really stands out and makes this entire thing crazy is I've only shown you the Mario section of the main menu. There's also Contra, where they took all of the Contra games and included a bunch of heavily modified versions of those original games as well. Then you've got Hot Blood, which is just the Kinokun series from Technos Japan, which just has the entire series of those games, which is actually kind of interesting because many of them were never released outside of Japan. You've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and also Adventure Island, but the moment you get to 545 in 1, that's when it gets to be way too much. Now there are a lot of rare and hard to come by games included in this list, and some of them are worth playing because this is essentially, as far as I can tell, the original games just being dumped into a ROM collection. For example, you've got Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 1, which works really well on here, and you also have access to the sequel, which is a very hard game to come by, and that's also really well presented on this console. But then you've got stuff like Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 3, which doesn't exist. So they took Heavy Barrel, that classic NES game from Data East, and basically made the character sprites look like Chip 'n Dale. So in my weird mind, it really feels like Chip 'n Dale are in like Vietnam or something, and shooting and killing killing people. This is really warping my childhood memories of these characters. While taking original NES games and modifying them to have new characters is a pretty common thing that I've seen a billion times before, this console went a step further and did things I simply wasn't expecting. Something like this, King of Fighters on the NES, a game originally released on the Neo Geo and never had an official release on the NES, but someone out there made a version and stuck it on here, and it is incredible. It does not work. It doesn't play well, and it doesn't control well, but it does exist on this system. These are the kind of things when you look at a really large library built into a console that you will find stuff that you simply had no idea could possibly be real. And not to be outdone by King of Fighters, how about Street Fighter 2 on the NES? This runs even worse than King of Fighters, but again, it is an existing game that someone had to have made. The two most interesting things about this game is someone went and took the sprites from Street Fighter 2 and kind of brought them down on the NES level. They did a pretty good job with it, and even the music is done pretty well. But when it comes to controlling the game, well, it went right out the window. And if those two didn't scratch your fighting game itch, how about Mortal Kombat 4? Not 1, not 2, not 3, Mortal Kombat 4. This game to me is hilarious because this was the first mainline Mortal Kombat game that used a 3D engine, so there was no way that was going to work on the NES. If they really wanted to rip one off, they probably should have taken Mortal Kombat 1, 2, or 3, and clearly that's what they did. A lot of these models and a lot of these characters are from Mortal Kombat 3, but what's even more funny is that when you look at the character select screen, it makes it look like there's a whole lot of characters you can choose from. Take a closer look. It's just duplicates. Duplicates of pretty much all of the characters. But let's say you don't want to dive into fighting games and you want to try out something that's a little bit more, let's say, modern. Something that was very popular on cell phones, perhaps. How about Angry Birds? And you know what? Not one Angry Birds game, 3. Now the first two are just puzzle games, modifications, hacks, whatever. They're not very impressive and they're actually really bad to play. But Angry Birds 3 is actually a real Angry Birds game. Someone took the original concept and built it with an NES in mind, and it actually kind of works. Now, I'm not saying it's better than the original, or even on par, but it really is a game that is effectively Angry Birds. It feels the same and it controls the same, just without a touchscreen. I'm shocked that this is on here, but hey, if you really wanted to play Angry Birds on the NES, here's your chance. For many kids out there that owned an NES, there was probably a good chance that they had a friend that had a Sega Genesis that had that one game with that blue hedgehog they may have wanted to play, but their parents wouldn't let them get a Genesis or a Mega Drive, so there was nothing they could do. Well, ladies and gentlemen, they came up with a solution. Here's Sonic the Hedgehog running on the NES. Oh, it's awful, all right. It doesn't even compare to the original. They did get the music and some sense of control, but playing Sonic the Hedgehog with a muted color scheme and these awkward-looking graphics just feels wrong. And when you're holding an NES gamepad, it really starts to mess with your head. The farther you go into this game collection, the weirder it gets. You'll find strange Pokemon-themed games with Pikachu, and they never quite play well. And once in a while, you'll also see games that I've shown off previously in some of the worst ever series that I've done in the past, like the worst plug-and-play console 2, which, believe it or not, has a lot of games on here that you would have recognized from that video. And even though they're on here, I can't say it's one of those really bad systems, because there are a lot of really good games on here, ones that I actually know. But it's never a guarantee. Sometimes you'll start up a game thinking you know what it's gonna be, and suddenly it's Mario Brothers with Teletubbies. I mean, who is this even appealing to? And other times, you'll play a game that looks almost exactly like the original, but instead of Pac-Man eating the pellets, he poops them for some reason. But at every corner, you're likely to find a game that just blows your mind, like Plants vs. Zombies working on the NES, which, again, shouldn't be here, but it totally is. This is unlike any other plug-and-play system, any other NES bundle rip-off thing I have ever seen. So after seeing all of that, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, there's no way this competes against the NES Classic. And in terms of hardware, you would be completely right. The NES Classic is accurately reproducing original NES games on your modern television in a really faithful way. And because it was actually legally done by Nintendo, it's all above board. But the Coolbaby isn't above board. It's stealing a lot of games and doing a lot of things wrong. But you'd probably assume I'd be saying you shouldn't get one. But honestly, maybe maybe you might want to. There are just so many weird games on here that I've never seen before that it might actually be worth getting just for that weird oddity factor. Knockoff hacks and clones, and some really strange original games that were made on here that are rip-offs of properties that never had original NES releases. Sure, not all of them run really well, but it's so weird to see these games existing. You could probably find these games online, or maybe even find them in other console collections like this, but if you really want something strange and bizarre, you might want to pick up a Coolbaby.